Reflections from Torch Trust, focusing on Christian faith and sight loss.
Hello and a warm welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the programme that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm your host, Marilyn Baker, and I'm looking forward to spending the next 30 minutes with you. Today we'll be meeting one of the newest members of the Torch Trustee Board, Philip Rice. If you've ever been on a Torch holiday, his name might already be familiar, as he's a regular volunteer alongside his wife Carolyn. And now let's meet Philip Rice. He's speaking with producer Lynn Davies.
So Philip, can you begin by telling us a little bit about yourself? Who is Philip Rice?
Some basic information about me, I suppose. I'm 76. I've been retired for quite a few years now. I've been married to Carolyn for the last 38 years. She's quite a bit younger than me, actually. She works as a nurse, so she's still working and I'm retired. And for a 76-year-old, I have a relatively young family. Our youngest child, Daniel, was born when I was 53. I got two older ones in their 30s, and we have three grandchildren. One who will be 8 in September, and the other two were both born in the last year. It's been quite an exciting year for us in that respect.
Oh, I can imagine. And I guess the good thing about being a grandparent as well is that you can spoil them and then you can hand them back when you get tired or when they get grumpy.
Absolutely, we spoiled them rotten.
As you should. But you've been involved with Torch for quite a while. Can you share a little bit about how you got involved with Torch and how that has evolved over the years?
Okay. Well, it's not so many years actually, Lynn. My first involvement with Torch was when I registered our church as a sight loss friendly church on the Torch website. And this was at about the same time as Torch started having monthly coffee mornings at Torch House at the end of the COVID lockdown. So it's not been all that long ago. And of course, when I got these invitations to the coffee mornings, it's quite easy for me as a retired person living only 5 miles from Torch House. So I go along and I went on that first one and tried to find out a bit more about Torch. And I've been going pretty much every month since then. These days I take my guitar along to help with the worship time that we have at the end of each coffee morning. I think it was at one of the first coffee mornings that the person leading the worship time mentioned the launch of the Torch Together holidays. And he asked us to pray for volunteers to come forward to make the holidays possible, basically. And so I asked what was involved and pretty much volunteered straight away. So it was really just after COVID and when the holidays began is when I got involved properly and told Carolyn about it, and she volunteered as well. And we both went to Scarborough for the very first Torch Together holiday. There's one coming up next month at Highgate House, which will be my 10th.
Your 10th, okay, and that is basically with a program that has been running for about 3 years.
The fourth year, yeah. So
fourth year and 10 holidays. That's a very big commitment, but it sounds like you're really enjoying it.
I just like holidays.
You just like holidays. We did have Becky's husband Gareth on a few weeks ago, and he was talking about being a volunteer on the holidays. And I would really like to know, from your perspective, what is it that you enjoy about it so much that you want to go on all of them or as many as you can? I mean, apart from obviously loving holidays.
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, I remember Gareth. He was on a holiday at Poole in just last month in June, and that was great listening to Gareth. He's a brilliant speaker, and the times we have for teaching and devotions is always special. But we also have a lot of fun. I suppose open mic night is always a joy when the guests and volunteers share their talents. Songs, poems, stories. Somebody will usually tell a few jokes. People play instruments. That's always fun. We always do that at the end of the holiday on the last evening, by which time everybody sort of got to know each other and can feel relaxed. And it always surprises me the talents that people come up with. From a piano recital to someone just telling stories. We had a lady called Janice, who some of the listeners might know. In the 1990s, she was a Paralympic swimmer. She had us doing swimming strokes as seated exercises. Can you remember we were all doing the front crawl in our chairs in time to ABBA singing Dancing Queen?
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
Lots
And
of
not the
fun.
kind of typical thing you would find on open mic nights as well.
You never know what's going to happen on open mic night. We have fun quizzes. And actually, I think one of the highlights for me of all the 10 holidays was when you, Lynn, came up with a game involving two teams each trying to write a song based on a selection of random words and phrases. And I don't think I shall ever forget trying to write that song about a lawyer, a car insurance, and a gym. We did afterwards call ourselves Philip and the Archangels. That was for a different reason.
That was for a different reason, but it sounds like a brilliant band name.
One of the biggest highlights for me is just meeting new people, making friends, amongst the Torch family. And I met all sorts of people on these holidays and made good, lasting friendships. Caroline and I actually last week went to stay with a couple of people that I met in Grange-over-Sands in 2023. And on a couple of other holidays since then. It's just great. If any of the listeners haven't been on a Torch Together holiday, they should definitely book up because people who've been before tend to book up as soon as booking opens to be sure of getting a place.
Everyone we've interviewed on Reflections who have talked about the holidays, from previous participants to volunteers, say how much of a sort of a family spirit there is. I mean, you got
Yes,
guests and you got volunteers, but everyone kind of mingles. And I remember this from when I was on the holiday too, that there isn't that I am staff, you're volunteer, this person is a guest. Everyone just hang out with each other, and I think that's really lovely.
we're all in the Torch family together, and it's brilliant. And if there are sighted people who want to volunteer, I'd certainly recommend that. They're a lot of fun, and it's just very satisfying.
We'll return to Phil and Lynn in just a little while. But first, it's time for Thought for the Week. This week's reflection is written by Stephen Richards and read for us by James Brookman.
Do you remember the children's comedy record, I Lost My Mummy? The song tells the story of a little lad who finds himself lost in a big store. Shoppers and even the manager attempt to both comfort and assist the little one, but he refuses to be consoled. Then his mother appears on the scene. His relief and joy are short-lived, as she gives him a hefty whack, saying, "That ought to teach you to go and get lost," and the lad's wailing resumes. Many reading this will remember the distress when, as a child, you became separated from a loved one whilst in the midst of a crowd. On the other hand, some will recall the panic when, as a parent, you realised that your child had vanished from view. Having been reunited, you then discover that the youngster was oblivious to the concern they had caused. Interestingly, we read in the Bible of how Jesus, while still a boy, became separated from his family when at a festival. His anxious parents went looking for him, only to find that he had other things occupying his attention and was unaware of their concern. I wonder if Jesus carried this incident in his heart when, nearly 20 years later, he embarked upon his ministry, which he said was to seek and save that which is lost. In the Bible, Jesus identifies himself as the Good Shepherd, going out and bringing together his sheep. He tells a parable of how the shepherd will leave the 99 in order to go after the one lost sheep. Having found it, the weary and possibly injured creature is hoisted onto the shepherd's shoulder and returned to the flock where it belongs. Jesus further teaches how his own sheep will recognise his voice when he calls them. For nearly 2,000 years, He has continued to call both lost and straying sheep into his fold. As with the parable of the lost sheep mentioned above, Jesus is still proactive, seeking, calling, and even carrying the hurting and injured home. What, according to the Bible, should our response be to all of this? If today you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. No matter how little or far from God's fold we have wandered, there is rejoicing in heaven over each sheep found. There will be no hefty whack, nor sharp rebuke, as in the song quoted at the start. Any shed tears are likely to be tears of joy. The well-known 23rd Psalm starts, "The Lord's my shepherd." Is he yours?
Stephen's reflection really made me think about that feeling of being lost and the joy of being found again. One of my favourite Bible stories is the parable of the prodigal son. I just love that image of the father running to meet his child, arms open wide. And when Jesus talks about a shepherd rejoicing over one lost sheep being found, I always imagine the party in heaven when someone finds their way back to God. Now let's return to the second part of Lynn's interview with Philip Rice.
But you've gone from being involved as a volunteer on holidays and involved with coffee mornings to becoming the newest addition to our trustee board. How did that happen, and what inspired you to take on that role?
How it actually happened was a bit like the holiday volunteering, in that the worship leader at the end of one of the coffee mornings asked us to pray that new trustees would come forward. And I mean, I just feel so at home at Torch, and even that God's brought me to Torch for a reason. This is where he wants me to be. So I was already wondering if there were other ways I could get involved. So obviously, when this request came up, I began making inquiries about it, what would be involved. And after a lot of prayer and studying the role description, chatting to various people, I said I'd like to be considered, and here I am. I was a bit anxious at first. I guess I still am a little bit, because I'm so new to Torch compared to the other trustees.
As a trustee, are there things that you are particularly passionate about when it comes to Torch's present and future?
Well, as I say, because I'm relatively new to Torch, I guess my passion right now is to get up to speed, to acquaint myself with all the activities that Torch is involved in, including the fellowship groups, for example, and who our customers are for braille and audio and large print and all of that, all the output that we have, and some of the history as well. Find out how we got to where we are as an organisation. I've had quite a lot of help in this already. I read recently Stella Heath's book, Coping with the Camel, which has quite a bit of detail about how Torch grew from just a few people meeting at the Heath's home. And that takes us up to about the mid-1990s, I think, when Torch House was still at Hallerton, and they still had Hurstpierpoint in Sussex. So I've still got quite a lot to learn, but I'm making good progress. And but from what I've learned so far, I know Torch began with young people. And in Coping the Camel, I've seen quite a few photographs of people photographed when they were quite young, and those people are still around many years later, and I now know them as friends. I could be wrong, but my perception at the moment is that the Torch family now has a much older profile. So if I have a passion, I think it's at this early stage anyway, it's about finding ways of making more younger people aware of Torch and what Torch has to offer. We currently have this Hope for All Cuddly Lambs initiative, for example, which is great. These lambs with their embedded audio facility that tells Bible stories. So they're beginning to attract attention amongst young children. And I'm hoping and praying that that initiative will begin to open some more doors for us and help us bring the good news to people across a wider range spectrum.
Do you have any scriptures that have been encouraging you throughout your faith journey and your life journey, and now also in your new role as a Torch trustee?
Yes, there's a verse which I think has been my favourite for decades. I mean, I have many favourite verses in Scripture, as you can imagine, but the one that has spoken to me from a long time ago is in John's Gospel in chapter 15, where Jesus talks about the vine and the branches. I am the vine and you are the branches. So if you read the first 10 verses of John 15 and wonder why Jesus is talking about vines and branches, in verse 11, he tells you, I have told you this, he says, so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. That's my favorite verse. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. And every time I read that, it just blows my mind that Jesus wants his joy to be in me. I mean, I remember clearly where this was read and who read it when that one sentence jumped out at me, as I say, probably about 30 years ago now. So, you know, if it's a difficult sort of a day, then it reminds me that things will get better. And if it's a joyful day, then I know where that joy is coming from. And I think that's the joy that I've experienced since becoming part of Torch. And in a way, it's a sort of a confirmation that I'm in the right place. I'm exactly where God wants me to be. And the whole Torch experience fills me with joy.
I also find it so encouraging to hear about how God is working in people's lives. It reminds me how powerful our stories can be when we share them with others. Well, I'm sorry to say we're out of time for this week, but we'll be back next week with more stories and reflections. And don't forget, if you're blind or partially sighted and would like to learn more about any of the services provided by Torch, including the Hope for All project, our new chaplaincy service, the Torch Retreat, our accessible books and resources, or our other groups, our client services team would be very happy to speak with you. The number to call for information and for song requests is 01858 438 260. That's 01858 438 260. Or you can email info@torchtrust.org. You can also find us on social media. Just search for Torch Trust on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or YouTube. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reflections. And so until next week, from me, Marilyn and everyone on the Reflections team, goodbye and God bless.
You've been listening to Reflections from Torch Trust.